Mount & Blade Bannerlord is the highly anticipated sequel to Mount & Blade Warband. It finally launched 8 years after its first announcement, on March 30th of 2020. However, much to the dismay of many, it was launched in early access, and developers have stated it will likely remain in early access for about a year. It's launching at $50, but comes down to $45 with their 10% launch discount, and an additional 10% off if you own any other Mount & Blade title. That's a lot of money to spend on any game, let alone an early access game, even if it is a Mount & Blade title. I've been playing it the past couple days, and I hope to share my thoughts, the thoughts of others, and my overall opinion I have about this fabled release to help you figure out if it's worth a buy today or if you should hold off a while. I've divided the video into several sections, with timestamps for each section in the description, as always. I'll start off with my initial impressions and experience, including performance, gameplay, and otherwise. I will then transition into what the general community is saying to hopefully give you the best objective idea of where Bannerlord presently is at and offer a conclusive opinion. As a disclaimer, I've played Warband a lot, both native and non-native, so this is being approached with the eyes of a veteran. Without further ado, let us begin. Overall, my initial impressions were extremely positive. The new character creation and backstory has been dramatically and vastly improved. There's far more depth and character to each aspect, making your beginning feel much more unique and believable. My only qualm was that there was very little explanation on skills, which have had a complete overhaul, so I merely guessed my way through what I thought be best. Regardless, I was very pleased with the experience of creating my character. Next was an optional combat tutorial. Similarly to Warband, it exposes the player to all the different weapon types and allows the player to experience the overhauled combat in a controlled environment. Overall, it was a very smooth experience, though I found myself missing a lot of sword swings that I normally would have hit in Warband. The weapons have a lot more weight, and it's rewarding to land a hit but more punishing if you miss. I'll be honest, at first, I utterly failed the basic combat tutorial. I have over 300 hours in Warband, but the one-on-one duels without a shield are very hard and unforgiving if you aren't practiced in manual blocking. The AI is unpredictable, and there's currently no auto-block like Warband had, so combat has a much higher learning curve. Also in the tutorial area was horseback riding. The horses feel much better and handle more like a living animal would, though my only complaint is how static and floaty jumping feels. I feel like horseback riding was completely overhauled, but they just copy and pasted the horse jumping code. Following the tutorial is a basic exposition to the story. Your parents were killed and your younger siblings were captured, but you and your brother somehow managed to survive. There's also a basic tutorial where the game teaches you how to talk to the village elder, how to recruit, and how to engage and fight enemies on the world map. The tutorial ends with you attacking a bandit hideout with your brother and your recruited soldiers. You and your brother then decide to split up. Your goal is to talk to nobles around Calradia to determine the worth of a rare artifact you looted whilst building up your clan. Your brother will try to find your siblings in the slaver market and get back to you when you've completed your tasks. Overall, it's a simple tutorial and decent exposition that helps the player grasp the simplest of gameplay concepts, though my interest in the story quickly fell off without the further follow-up. After that, it's a sandbox, and you're left to fend for yourself across the massive new map. And when I say massive, I mean it. The new map feels much larger, and traversing across it takes days. The sandbox feels very much like Warband, and I instantly felt at home. However, it is still very much like Warband, and new players may struggle to figure out what exactly they should be doing. Unfortunately, there presently lacks a variety of missions, and it is extremely common to see the same mission half a dozen times in an hour. The missions themselves are very similar to Warband and not particularly innovative, though some quality of life improvements have been made. Such as herding cattle to another village now puts cattle in your inventory, instead of trying to guide the godforsaken beasts aimlessly in Warband. There are some new quest types in cities where you can work for gangs or smuggle goods out, but in general they all have the same basic Warband recipe and flavor, which isn't particularly bad, but it's nothing new. Progressing your character is satisfying and makes sense. You level skills by doing what they're related to. Much like combat skills in Warband, all skills are now leveled through some sort of action. And, as you level them up, you choose perks within the skill. However, the way learning rates and focus points work is kind of confusing, and it took me a few minutes to fully understand. It seems somewhat overcomplicated and not entirely intuitive, though it is a nice system when you understand it. Some skills are also lacking in their explanation of how to level and improve them. Skills as a whole need more balancing, as some level up relatively quickly and others are taking a long time despite lots of focus on them. Recruitment has had a major overhaul and is now based on relations with notable NPCs at locations. This means you can recruit high-level soldiers from a village if you have high relations with the elder, but it can also mean you will be severely punished and left with fledgling volunteers if you never work on your relations. Overall, I appreciate the new recruitment system and their efforts to improve the previous system. I found the looters and bandit parties relatively easy to kill on realistic difficulty, as long as I am of equal or higher numbers, and I haven't had many issues progressing, though I am finding it difficult to build relations consistently to recruit higher tier troops. The new looting system and inventory in general has been greatly improved with a fresh coat of paint and functionality, and is now more accommodating for new and old players. Loot has been sparse, and I've gotten piss poor loot from bandits and looters, though that's to be expected. Smithing is a new welcome feature added, where you can customize and forge your own unique weapons and with attributes based on physical properties. I've yet to fully experience this, though this is a very promising feature. Another new feature is board games in taverns and in keeps. It's a great way to pass the time and break up the grind. Developers have stated that they will add a unique board game for each culture. Some things have been changed. For example, you can no longer enter castles or keeps immediately. You either need to have a high enough renown or bribe your way in. While the realism of this is nice, it comes with a caveat that you do not know if there's anyone in the keep until you bribe your way in. So trying to build relations with nobles in the beginning can be very costly. The new in-game encyclopedia is brilliant and looks amazing, as a plethora of information and links that are extremely helpful for both new and old players. It has been vastly improved compared to Warband. My only complaint is that it's very unintuitive to open it. You either have to click a link through game windows to open a part of the encyclopedia, or press N to manually open it up. There's no help button or any part of the UI that can directly open the encyclopedia, which I hope will be changed. Overall, the combat feels better to me. Many players complain that something feels off, and that it is too difficult. I personally think the difficulty is fairly similar to Warband, once you understand the new mechanics. New players may want to play with reduced damage, but veterans should be fine with realistic. The new horse mechanics have made horses a force to be reckoned with, as they're significantly more weighty and can literally plow through enemies, though they will quickly tumble against enemy spears. Globally, health has been increased compared to Warband, and units will typically have close to 100 points of health, making lethal hits a lot harder in general. But this is to compensate for the new physics-based combat, which can allow you to do insane amounts of damage early on by getting perfectly timed hits when you're full gallop on horseback. Performance as a whole has been great for me personally. I get lows of 80 and highs of over 140 FPS at 1440p resolution with an i7-7700K RTX 2070 Super, which is, of course, well above the recommended specs. I am also running the game off of an NVMe SSD. I have encountered stuttering only a couple times, and my loading screens are under 3 seconds in general. If you can't run it off of an SSD, expect long loading screens constantly. The graphics are great in my opinion for what it is. The campaign map is pure eye candy and dynamically changes as the seasons change, such as snow creeping from the north as winter sets in. In scenes, graphically, it varies from something straight out of The Witcher 3 or Kingdom Come Deliverance, but also sometimes looks as poor as native Warband. There lacks a consistency and quality across the board. Even in large battles, I maintain satisfactory FPS and can easily manage 500 soldiers. Past 500, performance varies. I've had great performance some battles with 1,000 troops and abysmal performance for others. Your battle performance will be mostly reliant on how good your CPU is. Presently though, large battles feel way too chaotic and lacking in strategy due to the small maps. The enemy charges you before you barely have a chance to set your troops up. The AI, in general, is fairly poor still, and I have yet to see them employ any notable strategies. The bugs I've encountered so far are for the most part just unpleasant rather than game-breaking. In general, I've only seen graphical glitches, misplaced or missing dialogue, and only experienced one crash in about 7 hours of gameplay. Others, however, have not been so fortunate. Many report being unable to open the game, report consistent crashing, game-breaking bugs, and otherwise. So be cautious, it's very much a beta and should be treated as such. If you're in it for the multiplayer, Bannerlord has vastly improved multiplayer over Warband. though it still lacks co-op campaign, which many were hoping it would have. The multiplayer modes it currently has are Skirmish, Captain, Team Deathmatch, and Siege, with more features, game modes, and additional content on the way. Since the multiplayer has already been in beta for the past few months, it is decently polished and is probably in a better state than the single player in terms of stability. The new multiplayer most notably brings Captain mode, which lets players team fight with their own individual small armies. In general, the early and mid-game experience is great, and Bannerlord very much feels like the successor to Warband, both in good and bad ways, though I find myself unironically missing features that Warband mods had. The endgame is lacking, and the gameplay is limited, though, as there's currently no way to found your own kingdom, and many management aspects are limited. It's basically Warband with a fresh coat of paint and a tune-up. At its heart, it's still very much a Mount and Blade game, and if you are expecting something truly revolutionary, you may be disappointed. That being said, it is still a great game and an excellent sequel that I highly anticipate seeing further develop. Bannerlord in its current state is unpolished, bug-ridden, poorly balanced and tuned, and lacks variety in content. If you can't wait to get Bannerlord and are willing to endure a subpar experience for the duration of early access, I would say to get it by all means. However, if you are a new player to the series or are fairly casual and prefer a polished game with all its features, I would recommend you hold off till full release, which will likely be in 1 to 2 years. It may not be great now, but I do believe it will soon hold to be one of the best strategy RPG games of the decade, and I highly anticipate the mods that will be developed. It's hard to give all my thoughts on this game in the time allotted by this video, and I may have missed some points, so take this all with a grain of salt. I greatly appreciate your viewership and you staying as long as you have. If you have any other tips or other points to make, please write a comment to let me and other viewers know. Subscribe and keep an eye out on my channel to see a lot more Bannerlord in the future. With that, I bid thee all farewell.